We're talking about a half a dozen guys or less that went into a fight against hundreds of combatants. How much more heroic can that be? And how much more homage can we pay to those veterans who
Right.
think and act that way?
At
We
the
need
same
to be
time
doing
we're
more.
doing that, Jesse, we had our Secretary of State sitting back in a meeting debating about what conditions had to be set before our Marines could come in to help them, what uniforms they would wear, even though the president had given a very clear, direct order to do everything that was possible to rescue them. Secretary Clinton obstructed that order for hours, and as it turned out, people didn't even show up until 18 hours later after the fighting was all over, and our people had actually been rescued, by the Libyan military intelligence officers of the former Gaddafi regime, who basically came to their aid and rescued them when our own Secretary of State stood in the way and would not allow the troops to deploy until we had gotten permission from Libya, putting at least another 30 people at risk had they not been rescued by the Libya military intelligence officers.
I mean, to allow our people to be rescued by somebody else and not our
And
people to
these were
rescue. I mean,
people
that's
who were formerly
absurd.
they were formerly loyal to Gaddafi, but their humanitarian nature came through. They saw Americans who they bared no ill will to before Hillary's war started, and they came to rescue them when we couldn't even send our own people. And it shows you that all along, Hillary has had us on the wrong side of the war in Libya, and even today, I'm hearing reports from Libya that the people are now basically protesting the support that the U.S. and the European governments are giving to this puppet government that's been imposed by the United Nations in Tripoli, that is basically infested with Muslim Brotherhood people trying to take the oil away from the Libyan people. And they have basically, the government that's in exile, which was twice elected by the people, has its own army, which has very quietly driven ISIS, out of Benghazi, out of Derna, and they're basically standing firm, and they're not going to let the UN take their oil. And nobody's even talking about that we're actually supporting, the wrong government once again, and the Libyan people are rising up in protest over it. But you don't hear that in the news.
You don't, and it's unfortunate that mainstream media chooses not to report that. But thank goodness we have other areas like the powervoices.com, and we have other entities to get this news out now on the social networks all around the world and connected through the internet. So that's one of the things that of course our technology has provided us. The so-called spring, the so-called what did they call it? The spring
Right.
that
Arab Spring.
the Arab Spring, the so-called Arab Spring,
Hmm.
where all those nations were toppled, one after the other, after the other, after the other. We could speak to hours on that.
Oh yeah.
In that
Yep.
respect,
That's why we
that's
have
the
a Syrian
reasons
refugee
why. Yeah,
conversation now.
well, that's why Merkel just today
Right.
talked about the fact that she regretted allowing all of these unvetted Syrian refugees to come flowing like a flood into her country, who
You
prior to
think?
that had no problems with things getting blown up and destroyed. France has had a problem for a long time. Sweden and Norway are having their problems now. It's just one after the other. And folks, I'm here to tell you, this is the United States of America. We have two giant oceans. We live in another hemisphere. We've been protected our whole lives. I really, really believe that whatever God that you believe in, this was a nation that this was a part of the world that was created to be the greatest part of the world ever compared to anybody else because we've been able to keep ourselves away from all of the strife of the rest of the world and the building and collapsing empires historically when you start studying history. But the point is we have to protect ourselves, and we have to vet, we have to do all these things because the world is a much smaller place, and we have to take care of our veterans. We must do that. And I want to shift the conversation real quick to veterans that are committing suicide, veterans that are
Mm,
homeless in all the cities and towns and communities across our nation. This is at epidemic levels, folks.
it is. It is.
Veterans who are committing suicide. This, this is a statistic that it'll knock you off your chair when you realize it. Joshua, tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, let's just dovetail from what you'd stated. Those fighting veterans of Benghazi, as you said, six ran in there, up against all odds. If you pile up 100 of those ISIS fighters, it doesn't even equate to the moral fortitude that was in one of those veterans. Now you take one of that same fortitude that's in that veteran, that spirit, and we're losing one an hour. In this conversation, we'll have a veteran that will have died by self-inflicted wounds.
Now,
And
let me
when you
repeat that.
start,
Let me repeat that, Joshua.
yeah,
I'm going to interrupt. That, folks, ladies and gentlemen, this is every hour. Every hour, one
every
veteran,
hour.
a man and or a woman, every hour around the clock,
Yeah,
24/7, 365 days a year, every hour, a young man or a young woman or any veteran is taking their life and committing suicide. That that's disgusting. That is absolutely
it is.
the worst thing that could ever happen. It's astounding. It's so astounding. It's hard to believe, Joshua.
It is. It's just like hearing $400 million in cash being put into an unmarked plane and sent overseas. You hear these things, right? And you just can't comprehend that this is real. Is this life? Is this really happening? Yes, it is. And I see it all the time. And I meet these men and women who are close to the brink of committing suicide, or meet the families as we dedicate a house to help end veteran homelessness, and we dedicate it into the name of a fallen seafaring soldier that was at the same time I was over near the Cole bombing over there in Yemen, overseas in Persian Gulf. He's an engineman. I served in the same waters with him. As we were going into one tour, he was coming right behind us to pick up, and we dedicated a home in his name and his honor, and to meet his family, to meet his wife, to see the eyes of his children. And when you find out the reason, is because he felt useless to his family and an area where he made a difference overseas in the Persian Gulf War, to come back and then be homeless and jobless. He said, I'm no longer being a member that is giving to my society. I'm taking from it. There's no point in me being here. And that is the issue that we're dealing with, is in the spirit of the veteran, to give them their next mission, but to also have a job, an opportunity for them to serve and give to their
Well,
families and to be able
there's
to more
another
friendly.
aspect of it too, and that is to continue the camaraderie, to feel like you still have friends, you have buddies, you have
Yes,
people who you can talk.
brotherhood.
One of the veterans today came up to me afterwards, and a friend of his who had been actually involved in counseling other veterans had several weeks ago committed suicide. And this guy was still shaken up about it. He said, no one would have known. He had a mask on. He wore the mask very convincingly, and they're still trying to figure out what happened, because he was reaching out and helping other people. I think it shows us that this is very, very complex, and it's not something that you can
Multiple layers.
cure quickly. But starting with the idea that the VA has got to have a specialty center on mental health, something different than even PTSD. We have burn
Big
units.
time.
We have areas for prosthetics. We have other types of specialties for brain injuries. And what Governor Pence said today was clear to him that we had to start dealing, with the mental aspect, the illness that people have that maybe doesn't manifest itself right away, and people don't even know, how depressed they are
Yeah,
inside. But
You know,
one of the
ma-
things here in Southern California, in Los Angeles, we have a tremendous homeless problem here because the weather's perfect year round, and it's just Southern California, and we have a tremendous epidemic level homeless problem, and many of the homeless men and women are veterans. the statistic is really actually pretty high. A lot of them are veterans, and when
30%
yeah,
plus.
right, exactly. And when you go into the areas that they're living, under freeways, behind alleys, in washes, near the mountains, and just everywhere, and you try to intercede and help and provide services. And I work the homeless aspect. I also work the Coalition Against Human Trafficking and Pimp Trafficking here in Los Angeles for 10 years. But homelessness is tied with that. It runs hand in hand. So we work that too as well. But when you start speaking, the professionals start speaking to these men and women, it's the question that they ask, and one of the questions that they ask is, what brought you here? How did you get here? Why are you here? Why don't you want to? What can we do to help you move out of this station in life? And many of the responses are really sad. One of them is they feel that nobody cares.
Right.
Yep.
Simple.
I have
Yeah.
a personal story on that, Jesse. When I came back the second time from Iraq, and I basically retired after that and took a job, running a construction company, and I had made some contacts at CNN, and I got a call one day and said that they had found, in interviewing some of these homeless veterans, one of my CBs, and I couldn't believe it. And I won't go into the long story, but he came back, and his wife had divorced him, took custody of the kids. He lost his job, lost his house, and he was just depressed. Well, I was able then to basically hire him, brought him over to Iraq in my civilian capacity, and he just began to flourish. He went back into the Navy Reserve, and ultimately, a few years later, became the Reserve Sailor of the Year. And so here was a guy who was basically beat down after serving heroically, given a chance, and then continue to excel. And I think that's really what Mr. Trump is talking about. We have to find the jobs for these people. We have to make sure they get the education they need, and they certainly need the hands of their buddies to help them.
Well, we got to come to the end of the show, gentlemen. Admiral Kubik, thank you very much, sir, for serving our great nation for all of those years, and thank you very much for stepping out and helping out, and thank you very much for joining our conversation here about veterans and the issues. And everybody knows I'm voting for Trump. I've said it right along, so I witnessed that, and I don't hide that flavor at all. And Joshua Macias,
Neither do we.
the chairperson for the Veterans for Trump Coalition, and we're going to be building something here on the West Coast. Joshua and I are working together, maybe a Harley run from Hollywood to Vegas or Houston to Vegas or something like that. We're going to be talking more about that.
Yep.
So we got to wrap the show up. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for the round table. Thank you for the video. Thank you for your time and effort. And both gentlemen, sirs, thank you for your service. And God bless you. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks.
Hey, it's the Brown Beauty on duty, Jesse Terrero. We are going to get on out of here, as they say. I'm going to act like a jet and fly like a strawberry and jam, baby. That's right. You like that one. That's an old. I'm going to act like a banana and split. I'm going to act like a tree and leave. It's the Jesse T Show, 5 to 6, right here. And you're straight on the point. The Brown Beauty's off duty. See ya.